Hi everyone, I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Nikki Lobczowski, who is a postdoctoral associate at the University of Pittsburgh. She's also a former high school teacher, got a bachelor's degree and master's degree from Virginia Tech and PhD from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. We are so fortunate to have the opportunity to learn more about her excellent dissertation research and the talk that she's about to give, which has already been published in Division 15's flagship journal, Educational Psychologist. So, without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lobczowski.
So this is really weird. There's emotions, and I'm gonna try really hard to regulate those. I want to first start off and thank the award committee, and just, for choosing me. I know that, the work in Division 15 is so excellent, so I'm still kind of wondering, like, what happened, but I'll take it, So before I dive into this, I just kind of wanted to say a couple things because I know there's a lot of grad students in the audience. Dissertations are tough, really tough. And so I thought I'd start off with 2 recommendations for your dissertation. The first one is just to write it on emotion regulation. It's just like a survival guide of like how to get through it. And then the other one is to find yourself a really good co-regulator. And I'll talk about, for those who don't know, what that means. And so for me, I had an amazing advisor who I won't put on the spot. Yes, I will. He's over there. Jeff. Everyone trying to look at him, make him really uncomfortable. So Jeff Green, who was there, and there was a lot of emotion regulation. And there was one particular part that really stuck with me. I was trying to do all these things and make it perfect, and he's like, a good dissertation is a done. There it is. But he said it in a different way that I'll never forget. He said, your dissertation will be the worst thing you write. So then I won an award for it, and no pressure. So you'll never get out of my head the rest of my life, no pressure. So I wrote my dissertation on emotions in collaborative learning, which I think the next presentation is also on some, which I'm very excited about to just make y'all listen to. This isn't on. So again, collaborative learning involves integrating individual thinking, motivation, emotions, behaviors, but not everyone always sees eye to eye. People come in with different perspectives, which can cause some issues, maybe like clicker's not working, and group dysfunction that needs to be dealt with. And so groups really need to regulate, and by that I mean plan, monitor, control, and evaluate their emotions in order to decrease negative emotions, maintain positive emotions, or even decrease positive emotions. Sometimes you get too excited. So the purpose of my dissertation, the overall purpose, was to explore how emotions and emotion regulation emerge and coexist in collaborative learning environments. And so the goal of this dissertation was to review, observe, and analyze, and then posit new relationships between both the formation and regulation of emotions in collaborative learning settings. So I did a 3-article dissertation. The first one was a literature review of what are the socio-emotional processes in collaborative learning environments. Then I did an empirical on the formation and regulation of emotions in groups with different meta-emotional judgments. And then the last one was the one Allison mentioned that was in Educational Psychologist, bridging gaps and forming a new model for socio-emotional formation and regulation. So before I go on, the underlying theory for this whole dissertation and most of my work is the social regulation of learning. So I think most people have heard of self-regulated learning, and this one hopefully is becoming more popular. So basically it's the regulation during collaborative learning, which again includes the planning, monitoring, controlling, and reflecting of cognition, motivation, emotions, behaviors related to learning. And within that, there's 3 main types of regulation that you can see. And so one is self-regulated learning, where even in groups, people can regulate themselves. Then you have what I mentioned with Jeff, co-regulation, where one person can regulate another person or the rest of the group, or even a couple people can regulate one person or the rest of the group. And it really talks about that transition of regulatory processes from one or some to all, or to others. And then the last one is socially shared regulation of learning, where the group really kind of co-constructs regulatory behaviors together. And research has shown that this is critical for sustained engagement and successful collaboration. So I don't have time, unfortunately, to go over all of this. So I had to pick one, and I decided to do the empirical article, which was chapter 3 of my dissertation. So for those of you that came for the Freckle model, sorry, I'm not doing it. But I did include the QR code for the APA Division 15 podcast that I did. That was for you, Wade. That I did with Jeff, where I talk about it. So there's 30 minutes that you can, listen to that. And then I'm not going to have time to go into Collaborate. This is the mobile-friendly application that we made and used in the class. So when I talk about an app, it's Collaborate. Again, there's an article in Computers and Education where you can read more about that. So there's the context. So to dive into the empirical article, the research aim was to look at the different socio-emotional processes that emerge in response to stimulus events experienced by 3 graduate pharmacy students with different meta-emotional judgments. So the participants we used, we had 6 groups of 4 to 5 of second-year graduate pharmacy students. We recorded each of their 9 meetings, which was about 2 hours each. They were mostly unsupervised. And they self-rated their emotions, which we consider their meta-emotional judgments, their feelings about their feelings, weekly in the app, so the Collaborate. The course, it was half individual, and this was the second half. It's a group project-based, where they had to pitch an innovative solution to a real-world pharmacy problem. And then they were assigned a facilitator that came in for about 30 minutes each week, but again, other than that, they were mostly unsupervised. And the class was offered pass-fail with this high-pass option that really didn't mean anything. But it came into play. People wanted the high pass. I'm like, okay. And so what we did a representative case study with one group that rated themselves, their emotions low over time, one that was kind of like in the medium, and then one that rated their emotions really high over the 7 or so weeks. So for the methods, there is an extensive code book. And so I recently published, I think that's kind of cut off, about the code book in a special issue of Frontiers in Psychology. And in this, we coded the interactions, the talk types, the stimulus events, and then we needed to code emotions, right? This is what this is all about. But that's hard to do with an observational protocol. In a perfect world, we would look at people and say, anger, joy, those kind of things. In a perfect research world. In the real world, though, it's not obvious, and so there's a lot of, I know you've got questions. Someone's going to ask a question about this. I know it's going to happen, because it always does. How do you measure emotions? So instead of measuring emotions and observing emotions, we observed emotional expressions. And so what I did was I came up with this 5-level system of inference of like, if we think that this is an emotional expression, so again, I'm not capturing like, I'm feeling really angry, but I'm not showing it. Because in a collaborative space, it's that expression that really impacts the group. So what we did is we coded for like verbal or suggestive statements. So if they said, I'm frustrated, we felt pretty good about coding that as frustration. But we also tagged on a verbal statement code, or suggested, like this sucks. Body language and facial expressions and tone. So you can see some of these are stronger inferences than others. And so, we understand that there was that weakness, but, I created this to support that. And then regulation, which included the phase, were they planning, monitoring, controlling, or reflecting their emotion, the mode, SRL, co-RL, or socially shared, and then the strategies were completely inductive. And so there's an article out, and it was not part of my dissertation, the Contemporary Educational Psychology article talks about here's all the different strategies they used. 23,000 talk terms. Yeah, that was a lot. Do not recommend, graduate students do not recommend. But it was extensive and a lot of time spent. So then what did we do with those codes? So while we were coding, we also created analytic memos. As we start to see these patterns, we're making notes of these. So then we can do a thematic analysis. And again, so the thematic analyses looked at stimulus events that sparked these social emotional processes We did 2 for each group, and then 2 across all groups. And so here, so here's kind of the different themes. So the low self-rated group, we saw a lot of low respect and trust between the group members, a lot of negative feedback and poor performance from, from the professor and in the class. The medium self-rated group, their motivation was real low. Low value for their facilitator, they didn't like the course, they just didn't want to do it, but they really bonded over it. I mean, they really showed that mixed emotions of like, I hate this, but we hate it together. And so then the high self-rated group, and again, they rated themselves as these. And then the high self-rated group had this establishment of both informal and formal group roles of like, this person's most knowledgeable, but this one was like the comic relief. And then they really had this amazing sense of community. And then across groups, we saw these shared stressors of the program. So these are 150 pharmacy students, year 2, they're all together, they take the same courses, they have the same stuff going on, they're going up for the same residencies in a couple of years. And then the collaborative working habits. And so again, I had to pick one. So I chose the shared stressors of the program so you can kind of see these things across group. And so again, the 2 themes for across groups was the shared stressors, and some common stimulus events were testing other classes. They spent a lot of time complaining about testing other classes. So what'd you put for this? I got this, what'd you get? Grades in general, and then the work-life balance or lack thereof. So again, I'm gonna talk about shared stressors, and I'm gonna show you an excerpt. And again, for those of you that aren't qualitatively not inclined, but like you like qualitative stuff, and you're gonna come at me hard for that. This is one example, right? 23,000 terms. I want to make sure that you understand. I didn't pick this out and say, there's my theme. So this is just one example of that kind of work-life balance. And so Don is reflecting on the time demand. So this kind of happened at the end of a class, or a meeting, they've already finished talking about it. And Don says, I miss living with my parents when I was like 6, when all I had to worry about was playing ball. Like, that was fun. And Viola said, yeah, that was so good. And Don said, I was telling a friend last night, I was like, I can remember being at my parents' house when I was like 14 and being like, I can't wait to be in college and do whatever I want. We don't have time to do whatever you want because you have to do all the stuff you feel like you should be doing. Kind of sound familiar? Yeah. And then Jason's like, that's why I miss working full time, because once you clocked out, you could have your life back. And I was like, yep. He's like, you could do whatever you want. Literally. But I don't know. And like I could leave work and be like, I'm off tomorrow. It'd be a Wednesday, who cares? Go drink on a Wednesday. And so you see this, and again, we've all been there. I might have picked that one on purpose. So in here, the emotional expression was stress and frustration. It's very clear from not only the suggestive statements that they're making, but their body language, their facial expressions, their tone. You also see this socio-emotional interaction. So again, there's multiple socio-emotional processes where they're sharing their personal stories, which is a positive socio-emotional interaction. They're also using this type of venting, where they're just like, complaining. But then there was no evidence of purposeful regulation. And so this is really interesting because were they commiserating? Like, when is that a regulation strategy? When is it and when is it not? But here you didn't see anything of like, it'll be okay, like hang in there, or, reframing, anything like that. They're just like, nope, this sucks, and then they left. So the main contributions of this article specifically, the big one is off-task talk. So usually in researchers, they don't capture it, they don't code it. I know I've done it of like, okay, no, let's skip to the part where they're actually talking about the content. But what we found was that this really contributed to the socio-emotional processes and provided some much needed context. It was in those off-task talk of like, oh, that's why they're miserable. Like, because they just took they all took a test in another class, and like, that's why they're distracted. So that was really important. And also, of the 23,000 terms, was probably like 50% of it. So I should have cut it, it would have been a lot easier. And then external factors. Teachers don't often prepare for these because how can they, right? Like, how can you prepare for these? But they can dominate a conversation if left unchecked. So like, if you're like, oh, my students are working for 2 hours on this project. No, they're not. They're talking about these other things. And while it's good to get it out so you're not like thinking about it, venting does have, some positive things to it. It can, if you don't check it, if you don't do that regulation, it can completely derail the whole conversation. And this one I didn't really get to talk to you about, but what was really interesting is this idea of shared and co-constructed priorities, getting on the same page. So again, the low group, like, they all hated it and each other. They couldn't stand each other. But the medium group, well, no, so the low group, some liked the project and the others, they just bickered the whole time. But the medium group, they all hated it, but they agreed that they all hated it. So they really did have those positive and mixed emotions, where the high group were in it to win it. They, and again, these are high self-rated. I didn't call them high. They said, hey, our emotions are good. We said, why are your emotions good? So limitations, observing emotions. Again, emotional expressions, we have a long way to go. I can talk about this all day, but I won't. And this really unique context. And so even though I see it as a strength because it's something that hasn't been studied, it provides a longitudinal look at this phenomenon. It is a unique context, and so, not that I'm trying to generalize, but I wouldn't be able to do that. So then in conclusion, I want to talk about the significance of the dissertation as a whole, and I know, again, I only gave you teasers for the other ones, but the literature review was really helpful in improving the understanding and help conduct better research, and it really informed the later chapters. And again, that off-task and internal factors, and again, that unique context really did help to provide new insights. And finally, the theoretical model was the first to look at both how emotions are formed, which you see in other psychology, but also regulate, which you've started to see more in educational psychology, so really bridging those two together. And then across all of them, it's just this really holistic view of emotions and collaborative learning by considering kind of both parts. So for future research, I promise I'm almost done, to look at the relation to other constructs, that automaticity and intentionality of regulation, which is just different for emotions, right? Sometimes we regulate our emotions like taking deep breaths without thinking like, I need to take deep breaths. There's this physiological piece to it. And then designing, and this is what I've been working on, designing the interventions, environments, and tools to help students understand and regulate their emotions. And then those just how do we measure emotions and create awareness. And so I just wanted to take a second to thank all the many people that helped, both at the School of Education at UNC, but also the UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy, including a grant that helped kind of fund this project. And then I have to, it takes a village, right? I was very fortunate to have an amazing community of people and animals to help get me through this. So, and then all of you, thank you so much for coming.